So here's how that line trace is going to work. As with all things, we're going to start simple and increase the complexity from there. So right click in the event graph and type in line trace by channel. Drag that up here. We're going to move this print string out of the way because we don't need it anymore because line trace has its own debugging line. Plug in that executable right here. So to make this line function, we're going to need a starting location and an ending location. Our starting location is going to be our camera, the center point of our camera. Just like player controller and player character, we have a node which will get whichever camera we're using at the time. So right click and type in get player camera manager. This is going to get the camera attached to us, whether it's a component or an actor. So from here, let's drag out and get actor location, which is going to give us this yellow node right here, which is great because we want a vector to plug into here. So we can just pop that in there and our starting location is done. Now our finishing location is going to be a little more complicated. This is going to determine the range of our weapons. So to do this, we still need the player camera manager. Let's drag off that and get actor forward vector, which is essentially the direction we're facing. From here, we're going to drag off here and we're going to combine two variables. We're going to do a vector star, hold shift, press 8, float. And this number here is going to be our range. We're going to control our range from a variable because our range is going to be different from every single weapon. So let's go ahead and create that variable now. Range. We'll make it a float, compile and save. And let's give it a base value of, I don't know, let's say 5,000. That's the Unreal Engine centimeters that we're using there. So drag that in and attach that variable there. That's our range. But on top of this, we also need to attach our actor location and forward vector together to get the final result. So drag off actor location, get a plus sign, and this is going to be a vector plus a vector. So we're going to start with our actor location for the first result, and then our forward vector times range for our second result. And we're going to plug that into the end. And that is our very simple line trace. One more thing we need to do before we move on though. Our character is a complex blueprint made of multiple components. At any point in time, this line trace coming out from the camera might accidentally overlap with our character. So here we have an array, which you can look at as a list. This would be a list of actors to ignore. So let's drag off and let's make a list. Even though this list has one entry, it's asking for an array, so we're not going to argue with it. And next up, we're going to need a character reference. So let's pop back over to the event graph, drag these guys down here. We'll get player character, cast to be hero. Right click and promote that to a variable. Hero reference. And now we can use that reference inside our function. I can drag and drop that there. And if there are any other actors I wanted to ignore, we could also ignore them as well. But for now, the only thing that's not going to get hit by a bullet is going to be the hero. So there's that. Now, draw debug type. This is where we're going to get our line so we can see what's going on. Let's do persistent for now. And now when we compile and save, this function should fire, giving us a line from the center of our camera forward. You can't see anything when you stand still, but if you were to move over, you can see there's the line that's been drawn from the center of our camera over to where we were aiming. We don't have a crosshairs at the moment, so it's hard to tell where we're aiming, but because we've selected persistent, those lines will stay there forever. So these are all line traces. Now here is a perfect example. Our line has intercepted an object, and that object would then be registered once we call the event, because the line trace can retrieve data. So once that line has hit something, it continues onward. However, all we need for the moment is the first point of contact right here. So if I was to have a look below the map, you can see a whole bunch of green lines, just like that. And they're going to the range of 5,000. So there it is, our line trace is working. Next up, let's affect the health of something. Here is a structure. A structure is essentially a list of different types of variables. So drag out the out hit and hit break hit result. It doesn't look like much, but once we hit this drop down, this is all the data we can get about what we hit. But the only thing we're really interested in is the hit actor. If we were to right click now and type in affect health and get that message, we can then make that hit actor the target. Plugging the executable in. There it is. Now, when we hit something that contains the affect health interface, being every character, it will suffer damage. Which brings us to another variable which we can add right now, the damage variable. So every weapon's going to contain damage. So let's go over here to the variable list, add another float, and that float's going to be called damage. Because this is an assault rifle, let's just do what I've been balancing with so far. You can make this anything you want, but it will eventually be an automatic weapon. So I'm going to go 7.5. And that's the damage that's going to be done. Again, we don't need these overlapping lines. So if we double click on that line, we can get a reroute node, selecting these nodes and pressing Q. We'll line them all up, keeping it neat. So that's the very, very basic version. And this is going to get more complex as we go later on. Another thing we can do with this is spawn an emitter. Now, emitter is a type of effect. The easiest way to explain it would be just to show you. If I go spawn emitter at location, I can then plug this in after effect health and see here's where it's really important that this is an interface. If this was casting to whatever actor this was, even as a base character, if this failed, if this didn't hit anything that was that actor, then we wouldn't get to the next part of the chain. Now, I'd argue that affecting health is more important than the emitter, because the emitter here is just going to be an explosion. It's just like that explosion. So I'd argue that this is more important than that. I wouldn't want to put this further down the chain because of that, just in case it failed. I don't have to worry about that with an interface. With casting, you do have to worry about whether it fails or not. But that box, our health crate here, did not have that interface, and thus it wouldn't care. It would be like, oh, I don't have this interface. Another way to look at that would be the message. It's sending a message. If the message doesn't get to its intended recipient, or it doesn't have the right type of letterbox even, then it's just going to ignore it. It's just junk mail, essentially, if it's not directed at them. So with the spawn emitter at location, I've selected P_explosion, which was part of the starter content. And then the location is going to be plugged into this location over here. And this is going to be a massive explosion. So I'm going to go 0.25 for scale on all scales. And this is going to give us a better idea of what we're hitting. Compile and save, test. And now when I shoot, there's an explosion. A little one, almost as if it was explosive ammo, but it's more effective until we get some blood splatter effects, which have to be created in a particle system. The next thing we'll do with this line trace here is we have all the space here between our actual line trace and the fire weapon. We're going to set it up so that if we don't have any bullets, we can't fire. So let's grab ammo actual, drag it in, and get it. And we will drag off here and type in an equal and keep that at 0. Hold B and click anywhere on the event graph for that branch. We'll move this stuff down out of the way. So the first question we're going to ask is our ammo equal to 0? Or instead of asking, is our ammo equal to 0, we could ask, is it equal to or above 1? So that we can run off the true. If we are not equal to or above 1 in our barrel, we're not shooting our weapon. And then if we are equal, then the first thing we want to do is subtract said bullet from the gun. So drag it over and let's get a setter. We're going to set ammunition to whatever value it was and subtract 1 from that. So every time we shoot a bullet, we are now subtracting said bullet and plug the executable back in there. Now, because we don't have a UI at the moment or any HUD, we're going to get a print string so we can see how many bullets we have. Plug the result of ammo in there. Again, I'm purposely leaving this out here so it's ugly and I remember to come and get rid of it when we have a HUD. So let's test that out. I think from memory, I put 30 bullets in the assault rifle. And this is the other thing too. This is a universal variable for every weapon we've created, which means this script here works on every weapon. Back over to test, hit play. And now if I shoot 29, 28, 27, and now I cannot fire. 1, no line trace, which means 2, no emitter. But 3, I'm also not getting that print string anymore because it's later on in the chain and we're getting no result. Next up, let's add a variable for reloading. This is going to be a Boolean and it's just going to be a simple is reloading with a question mark. Changing it to a Boolean, compile, save. Because before I fire my weapon, I want to check if I'm reloading. Because if I am reloading, I don't want to be able to fire the weapon. That's not very realistic. And if I'm not reloading, an example of where we have to use the not Boolean because it's just a Boolean result. If I'm not reloading, then we can go ahead and fire that event. To test out our reloading, let's pop over to our assault rifle. Get is reloading. Set is reloading. And we're going to set it to true. And then we're going to get a delay, which you cannot use delays inside of functions. We're going to delay it for 2 seconds. And then let's copy this over and set it to not reloading. So when we hit reload, we're going to trigger this delay. And when we're done, we'll trigger the event. So this is just a test. We're not keeping this at all. Compile, save, back over to test. Bam, 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 bam. Reloading my weapon. I press E. Now I can't shoot. And then when I'm done reloading, we get the reload weapon function at the end. So that's working. And next up, we're going to tackle reloading.